Good morning, I'm Taylor Wiesner and my project is titled The Integrated Hybrid. I'm really excited this morning to be able to guide you along the design story for this very dynamic, true hybrid that I've designed for the Eastern Docklands in Amsterdam. But first I want to begin by showing you some images of this true hybrid that I've designed. So if we look at the site that I chose to design my graduation project on is the last remaining vacant site in the Eastern Docklands. It's a very exciting opportunity. As the rest of the train is completely built, this is the last vacant site to really make a statement. And we were challenged by our studio to design a housing hybrid that would be a statement for the 21st century. So this was just a very exciting starting point and stepping off point for my design project. In terms of site analysis, some things that stood out to me were first that there is public gathering space adjacent to the site. However, it is very disconnected from the buildings. It's not integrated with the buildings. And secondly, what also stood out was that the average length of residence in the Eastern Docklands is shorter than other places in Amsterdam. And so this really stood out to me as a cue that this could point to the fact that the existing housing stock is not adaptable. And so these 2 points from the site research, or site analysis, really drove my problem statement and my research question. And my first problem statement is that the Eastern Docklands area lacks a true integrated gathering point for the public. In regard to the existing housing stock in the area, it is unadaptable. In short, the area lacks flexible dwellings that can accommodate the current as well as future needs of the dwellers. And what followed were some research questions. First off, how can a hybrid building combine dwellings with public functions? And secondly, how can a flexible dwelling design meet the dwellers' future as well as current needs? And so if we look again at the existing situation, to the west we see one sort of situation occurring, which is very large buildings, very large facades, and really no presence of the human scale to the west of the site. But if you turn to the east and you see a very different situation, you see smaller scale buildings with much more of a presence of the human scale. And so again, I saw our site as the exact point as an opportunity to link these two different situations, what we see at the west as opposed to what we see at the east. So in terms of massing, again, here is our site. I wanted to first form a continuity with the east and then to the west, and this is what would result. And after that, going back to the site analysis, we also noticed that there is a pedestrian street that cuts through some of the buildings present around our site. However, it is not functioning in all areas. And so I wanted to, instead of actually interpreting this line and continuing it through the site literally, I wanted to instead project it and use it as a carving point that would form a much more human scale at the south of the building. So use it to carve through the massing at the south. And then turning again, using more points, existing points in the area, using the warehouses that we see to the west as another point of connection and carving furthermore out of this volume. So to really site this volume and connect it not only to the east but also to the west of the site. And lastly, then taking this very large volume that I resulted with and carving a central portion out so that sunlight can penetrate to the core of the building. You can see here how it would perform in the summer as well as in the winter. During my graduation project, I began by conducting a theme research with my theme research partner, and we looked first at we researched into the true hybrid building. And so, like I said at the beginning, we were challenged by the studio to design a housing hybrid on this site. But we first started by asking ourselves, what is a hybrid building? And so by collecting research, we were able to establish a mental model with 8 qualities or points that the actual true hybrid contains. And so if I could quickly go through these for you. First off, the true hybrid addresses project scale as a building as a city. Secondly, the true hybrid, it reacts to urban density in terms of reacting to its context. Third, the true hybrid addresses functional diversity in that it combines very unexpected functions together. Furthermore, the true hybrid addresses functional scale in terms of the fact that it may contain larger functional blocks, but they've been broken down into smaller functional blocks and distributed over the building. Furthermore, the true hybrid can integrate both visually and or physically. The true hybrid is also flexible. It can accommodate future needs. Furthermore, the true hybrid has vertical connections present that promote integration of its functions rather than segregation of its functions. And lastly, the true hybrid has integrated public gathering space. So it extends the public domain not only horizontally, but also vertically into the building. And so using these 8 points of the mental model, I was able to, throughout the design process, keep on checking back and ensuring that my own design met all of these 8 points. Furthermore, during our research, this quote really stood out to me. It says, "The hybrid design task is not geared to an endpoint, but to a strategy. The goal is to find an unambiguous motive for every situation." And so I really took this, again, as a leaping off point, to not see this building as an endpoint, but a strategy that can really adapt to the dwellers' future needs and even society's future needs in terms of the public functions that are present. If we turn now to the program, obviously it being a housing hybrid, I knew first off that dwellings were going to be present, but then when I started to research the program, I noticed that there's a lot of universities present in the area, and which generates a large student population, and they need a place to study. And so I decided to locate a study library within my building. It spans over the first 4 stories you can see here. It also has a corresponding cafe as well as historical center up on the 6th and 7th stories of the building. Furthermore, this study library that I see it's moving away from the actual physical book and moving in towards more of an electronic-based study library. So a place where people with like minds could go meet, you could have a coffee, a very dynamic space. And furthermore, I've also placed it's flexible dwelling or flexible short stay housing, which you could also consider a hotel at the north side of the building. And I saw that going hand in hand with the library, really catering not only to a population that needs study space, but also a population of students that needs places to stay, maybe for a short or longer period of time, as well as a hotel that could cater to travelers even. Here again is the site plan. I've located parking in the basement of the building. If we turn to the ground floor, something that really stands out here is I have provided a private entry lobby for the dwellers. So I'll kind of go into this a little bit more in a moment, but the dwellers do have the option of coming in to a more private space or the option of coming in through the more public area and using more public access to go to their home. Here you can see an impression in the library, and again, I saw this as a very dynamic and flexible space even in and of itself. So the library not only contains more conventional seating, but also more free-form seating so that the building occupants can use it to meet their specific needs. Catering to their specific needs, I've also placed a quiet study room on the first floor, as well as lecture and meeting rooms on the second floor. You can see here too, on the second story is where the introduction of dwellings occurs, and so you can start to see this interaction between more public functions and a more private function, which would be the dwelling. On the 4th floor, you can see, as I said before, this flexible hotel space at the north side of the building, and it's juxtaposed with with more permanent dwellings here on the south side. But they really communicate and are able to integrate with each other across this communal space. And if we zoom in, you can see that for every 10 hotel rooms, they share a kitchen. And this is exactly how the communal space would be would appear, that the more permanent dwellings can use in the back, and then the hotel on the other side. On On the 6th floor, as I said before, this is where you see the cafe that I provided as well as a historical center. I thought this was a very nice opportunity up on the 6th floor to really start to provide a great view of the area. And so you're up at a height where you can have a great vantage point of the surrounding context. And here you can see an impression of the cafe. And again, in section, you can start to see how these different functions, public versus private, start to be placed. And so really steering away from the very strict and rigid plinth typology, which would place public functions in the ground floor, I've instead taken this true hybrid approach where public functions have been plugged in vertically in the building. And if we move again to discussing exactly how a dweller would go from the ground floor or even their car up to their dwelling, they have the choice, like I said before, to take this very public route through the atrium, through this very dynamic space where they can really feel integrated with this very dynamic space, or, which would appear like this, or they have the choice, like I said before, to enter through the private dweller's lobby and go up to their dwelling in that way. So if you're actually very close, so I don't know if you physically need to move, but you could start to see more here in the way that I was describing this this very dynamic staircase. This very dynamic staircase which cuts through the building. And so really the dwellers, like I said, have the option of going the more public route to their home or the more private route to their home. Furthermore, so I'm giving you a small glimpse at this side, really how the dwellings are situated, and that's a great transition, I think, to start to move into how I've approached the dwellings. And so I've provided 4 different typologies in the building. As you can see here, there's 2 different typologies that have sohos. One has a single-story soho. The other typology has a double-height soho. As well as the last typology has a shared kitchen. And so I saw this dwelling really being catered towards either an elderly population as a very interesting living situation where they could feel more at home together, or a typology that would cater to young families and really this great kind of experience of raising your children together in this shared space. And so looking here, I'll go into materialization furthermore later, but you can start to see here within the dwelling this very dynamic nature that I've really tried to design within this building, not only that you experience through the atrium, but also down to every last detail, including these operable perforated copper shutters that are present. And so within your dwelling, you have the option to really raise or lower these at your will during the day. There's also a great deal of flexibility that I wanted to provide within the dwelling typologies. I've provided a column structure first, as well as partition walls, which would allow one to really start to expand this space, and so at their own need, have either increased living space or increased sleeping space. And secondly, I also have, like I said before, provided a SOHO, which is a small office, home office, which is a very polyvalent space. So they could use that space either more publicly, as you see here, or more privately as an additional bedroom. Within this other typology with the SOHO, I've provided the ability to expand vertically. And so you could use this space either as a double height open space or add a second story afterwards and use it as more habitable space. And I even saw this being as the most probably public option, where this small Soho could function as a small apartment that the dweller could rent out if need be. Here you can see in this double height Soho how it would really interact, and the very visible nature of it, as well as if you see here, these wood louvers, which I'll kind of go into later. If the Soho is used publicly, it can be very connected to the atrium, or you have the option to close it off more. In this other typology, I've placed an additional room downstairs, which could either be a master suite, or it could be used more as a workspace if the dweller desired to have a space that was more accessible to the sunlight. And so it could be, it is oriented on the outside of the building as opposed to within the atrium space. And so you have flexibility there. And lastly, as I described before, this last typology has a shared kitchen, which can, if the dwellers did desire at a later point, be cut off and separated into two different kitchens. And here you can see the shared kitchen in its total format. And talking about our site, it's a very special site, and so going along with that, I wanted to provide a very special interior quality as well. I wanted to have the ability to have, or I wanted to provide higher interior spaces to really be able to just bring a more special dwelling quality. And so the interior height is 3.3 meters. You can see here briefly the materialization that I provided, and which I'll go into more later, but it would be copper shutters at this facade and copper panels, and wood here in the gallery, wood paneling. And so if I transition now to talking about the structure, in terms of the structural requirements, very early on in my design, I wanted to set forth some requirements that would help me decide what structure was the best and how to proceed. And so I stated that I wanted open plans in the commercial spaces. I wanted the ability to combine dwellings. I wanted to provide a structure without beams. I wanted to be able to achieve very clean cantilevers, and I also wanted the ability to incorporate pipes and decks into the slab. And so just looking at this, it was really a signal to me that a column structure was the way to proceed. I also started to research slab systems because, as I mentioned here, my last point was that I wanted to incorporate pipes and decks into the slab. And so I came across a bidirectional voided concrete slab, which is called the whole deck slab, and you're able to access the slab from not only the top as well as the bottom. And you can see here at the far right, it is a cast-in-place system, and this is what the formwork would look like here. One thing, though, that stood out to me as possibly being a problem was the fact that with this system, there is far more access provided on the bottom side of the slab as opposed to the top side of the slab, which would not be optimal in a dwelling situation. And so that kind of stuck in the back of my mind is, how could I take what I already see as a product and really redesign that to work the best for my hybrid building, but also for buildings going forward in general. And so deciding to go with a column structure as well as the whole deck system, or a system very similar to the whole deck, I would be able to not only, as I would desired, achieve open plans, I would achieve the ability to combine dwellings, I would be able to provide a structure without beams because beams are not necessary in the whole deck system. I could also achieve very clean cantilevers, and lastly, a very, very big benefit in the whole deck system is that you can easily incorporate pipes and ducts into the slab and achieve a slope in them, and so that you can have freedom to move, say, a kitchen or a bathroom around within your dwelling as your needs change. So this is the voided bidirectional concrete slab that I have designed. It has, like I said, equal access from top and bottom of the slab. Here it is with the flooring system that I'm proposing with insulation on the bottom, and it would really lock into the grid. And lastly, here's how it would look with the connection at the column. With the whole deck, I was also, or a system very similar to the whole deck, I was able to achieve very wide or very long column spans. because the slab is 500 millimeters thick. If I move again to discussing the Soho, and again, this ability to expand vertically, I decided that I would provide anchors within the edge of the slab within this Soho, so that at a future moment, if the dweller desired, they could go in and add a lightweight timber floor to this space and achieve, like I said before, more habitable space. Moving to climate, I have, at the north side of the building, I've provided openings in the facade to allow fresh air to enter off of the water and go ahead and flush out the hot air out of the atrium. And on the south side, you can see that I've kept that facade closed due to the noise, or almost closed except for the small openings that you would see up here, due to the noise of the train. And here you can see the difference between the detail at the north as opposed to the south. And again, this branch that you see going across the atrium also features more vents at this side to be able to flush the hot air out. So if you're in a dwelling, for example, and you have a bedroom adjacent to the atrium, you have the ability not only to provide fresh air that comes in through the atrium, but I also provided a secondary means of providing fresh air to the dwelling, and that would be through balanced ventilation, which it draws in fresh air and it treats it either to cool it or warm it with existing air within the dwelling, and then it delivers it to the room. And so between not only the actual fresh air coming in through the dwelling, or through the atrium, excuse me, but also through this balanced ventilation, I really thought that these two things together could provide adequate air quality within the dwelling. If I move on to, as I said before, the materialization, I again set forth some design requirements for myself. So I wanted the material and also the facade itself to be able to be dynamic, not only for aesthetic, but also for solar purposes. I wanted the ability for the facade to contribute to a clean form if it could. And lastly, I wanted to be able to contrast with its surroundings and really stand out. And so in doing material research, I kind of narrowed down the materials to ceramic and also copper. And I ended up going with copper. It's been brushed, and I'm also proposing coating it with an anti-tarnish coating so that it would really maintain this very vibrant, more shiny appearance. Okay. Here you can see, as I've said before, the dynamic nature of this building not only begins in the atrium, but also goes down to every last detail, including these operable copper shutters. If we step back again, you can see in terms of the materialization of the building. And if we turn again to the atrium materialization, I wanted to provide a material that brought more of a sense of home, as this really is, there are dwellings present in this building, and so I went with wood primarily, but also stucco at the front doors. And in front of the Sohos, we have this operable louver system, which could either be pulled back or cover the Soho glazing. And here you can see that. So along this process, I've constantly asked myself, am I truly meeting these requirements? And when I got to the end, I wanted to make sure and go back and say, have I actually met all of these true hybrid requirements? And so first off, I believe that my building is a building of a city, as it contains various different functions. I believe that the way in which I've really reacted to the existing urban context, I believe that my building is further a true hybrid, as it really reacts to its urban context and forms a link between the East and West. In terms of functional diversity, I believe that this building really does combine very unexpected functions, not only dwelling with a library, but also the fact that there's various Sohos which could contain a plethora of additional very unexpected functions. Furthermore, in terms of functional scale, I've taken a very large program block of the library and broken it down into smaller pieces and implemented them over the entire building. Furthermore, in terms of function integration, my building integrates in terms of this very close presence of the Soho being very adjacent to the dwelling, also visually through this very dynamic atrium, and so you can see across and really experience from a public point the ability to see things happening at the private point and vice versa. In terms of flexibility, I believe that, as I explained before, the concrete slab working with the column structure really provides not only horizontal flexibility, but also vertical flexibility. And even in the fact that I have oriented this library over several different stories, so at a later moment, if part of the library was to close, it could become easily another function. Furthermore, in terms of vertical integration, as I said before, all of the functions could possibly be accessed through this very open and dynamic staircase within the atrium. And lastly, I believe that I have extended public domain not only horizontally within the building, but also vertically up into this terrace level and the functions that are located up higher in the building that are public. So as we see here, I would argue that the building that I have designed is a true hybrid building. And thank you so much for your time. This has been a great experience.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. I would like to give you for to hear your questions.
Well, thank you very much, Taylor. It was so clear that I almost have no questions, but I have, of course, some left. One question I have, in the beginning you said that you really did not know actually what a hybrid is. Is it a mixed function building or is it something else? And then you conclude your search in terms of saying it's not an endpoint, it's a strategy. Actually, during your presentation, you filled all these functions into this building, and it seems a little bit to me that, in a way, of course, everything is flexible, but actually it's an endpoint as well. That everything is determined. There's a library, there are study rooms, there's a short stay, and so on and so on. How can I see that what's standing there is a strategy? It can even extend, it can grow, it can, how do you
I think that I could answer that in terms of, I've seen the context as really putting a restraint on the building. And so I see that the way in which I describe the building linking itself from east and west as the constraint. At this site, I believe that this is the maximum volume. And so I see this as a shell, which within that shell, the functions can be changed. It's very flexible. But I do not see that, I believe that for this site, this volume that I have extruded from connecting it not only to the east and to the west as the maximum volume for this site. And so I really see it as a generic shell that within that is where the flexibility occurs.
Very clear answer, thank you very much. And the second one, as well, in the beginning of your presentation, you said that there is no presence of the human scale in this area, and especially on the west side, or is it where?
It's the west.
The water side,
Right?
There is even a lot of offices are empty, are not used. So what did you do, especially on the waterfront side, to avoid another building without a human scale on plinth level?
And I really see that coming in terms of the materialization. So from this water side, although the volume is quite large, you not only have the cafe that's present up on the 6th floor, which you can start to see this activity going on if you're a pedestrian down at the street level, but also I think I carried that through in terms of materialization. And so these smaller elements that you see present, these shutters which bring a very dynamic feel to the building, really contribute to furthermore bringing the scale back down to the human, I believe.
May I ask a third question? Very short. Just because this copper is so expensive, and perhaps this would be the first which a developer would kick out. What would be a good alternative?
I believe that ceramic could be used. It's not going to be as durable. That's why I went with copper, but ceramic would have very much the same quality in terms of this very shiny appearance. I've seen it implemented on a building in Spain, and it can be many different colors, and so I think the color could be closely matched, but the durability is where I would question it.
And the shutters would be in different material then?
The shutters could also be, because the ceramic can be perforated, it would need to have a metal mesh on the back though, so the perforations within that would have to correspond very closely to the metal mesh, and I think that's why I steered away from that very early on, but yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I'm impressed by the amount of material that you presented to us and the way you did it. I would like to go back in the process, because pretty early on in the process you decided that this would be the shape of the building. It came out as a natural fact for you. If I would see it for the first time, I could get the impression that it's rather a fortress or castle, intersected by one clear passage or connected space. If I would see that for the first time, could I be overwhelmed by its monumentality? And do you think, is it too monumental for the fact that it's also a dwelling building? It's characterized collective space.
I would argue that it's, in my opinion, even less monumental than the pure dwelling buildings that we see to the west. Their facades are much larger in scale than this even, and there's no deviation in the facades that we see. And so I've started to bring in, like I said before, more of this smaller element that occurs within the facade to really start to ground and bring this building back down to the human scale. And so this dynamic nature that you see occurring. I also believe that I've really strove to connect the building, like I said, to the east and to the west. And so I think that the combination of it being very connected to its context, but also the fact that I would argue it's less monumental than the pure dwellings to the west, or pure dwelling buildings to the west.
Okay, and in which way could the building change when the library turns out not to be a success?
Every single story of the library could become something different, because the access to the library has been achieved through the atrium, and so each functional block of the library could become another function, and that could be dictated by the market, by the needs of the dwellers, by the needs of society.
And if maybe you can show us one of the interior renderings of an apartment.
Sure.
And then looking out. For instance, this one. We see these shutters coming out. That's an automatic device, of course. But then we see one big screen, glass screen. Can I open a window?
So the facade that you're seeing with the flat screen is oriented to the south. That's the side with the train. But every other facade has operable. So
to the inside, as French doors or something.
As a slider. With a balcony right in front of it.
Okay, so this is the exception.
Exactly. But within this same room, even this one right here it's a slider. You can see the line right there, and then again you can see the slider here. So only due to the fact that regulations actually don't allow these to be sliders, because of the train noise, they're solid.
Yeah. In the end, I could imagine that if this building would be realized, you could do fantastic ads like with all the shutters running a ballet for closing it entirely. Opening it entirely. And that allows the building to be different every day.
Yes.
And that is one of the strengths of the strategic concept of the facade rather than the permanent.
Exactly.
Facade, as I understand. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
And then one question
No, that's it.
Yes. Thanks, Taylor, for your nice presentation. I also want to continue on the issue of the facade. I mean, I can see, especially on the big, overall model, that it stands out as a big building just because of the materials. You told us that one of your concerns is the current and future needs and the uncertainty of the future. Library can change in width or maybe even in use. Is it readable from the outside? I mean, some buildings to the west we have the I think it's public library of Amsterdam. That's a very visible building, isn't it? Now, can I see from the outside that this is if you tell me we meet in the library, is it visible as a library?
So in terms of materialization, I've really chosen to go with more of a generic facade. I did not in any way want to highlight one specific function with a material. I think that's very common with the plinth typology, so only highlighting the public space of the building with a certain material, and I wanted to steer exactly opposite of that. I wanted to create a shell that could, like I said, accommodate future changes. So in terms of standing and trying to locate, is that the library? Not necessarily. I see this as being much more of a space that would draw you in terms of the atrium, and then within the atrium you would be able to navigate your way to finding the public functions.
I'd like to talk with you a bit about your floor system. Could you show a slide of your interpretation of the Holdex system?
So this is the original, and
Yes.
then this is my interpretation.
As I understand it well, this is cast in place.
It is.
And I mean, now we're moving into product development and product design, but I mean, that's very interesting and intriguing. This may not be the easiest form to port in situ, especially these circular holes. Is there an option to also precast and have elements and then maybe connect them on site?
There could be. When I was designing, I noticed that there could be the potential to really design kind of maybe a few different modules that would possibly work for every building that you could design. But I really saw this, I'm presenting it as a cast-in-place system because I know that I've seen through animations in Holdeck how easy it is with the formwork that they have to disassemble it. I'm actually not sure. I can't recall off the top of my head.
It's a one-time.
It's reusable, I believe. It's very durable. I want to say like a plastic of some sort. That it's very durable. When it's removed, it stays as it is.
I think the real subject of this element, of course, is maybe designing the formwork rather than designing
exactly.
The formwork could very well be the bottleneck of the system, but it's worth looking into.
I might comment on that though, that the formwork is actually more complicated in the Holdeck system because you have their holes actually taper at the top, and it creates a much more complicated kind of orientation for the formwork, whereas with my system, the holes don't taper, et cetera, et cetera. It's a little bit more linear than their system. So it may be even easier to disassemble in terms of formwork.
The tapering, was that because you need the shape of the hole, or is it to fill the formwork better? Because that's also a problem for us too. Having,
I believe...
I was talking about concrete technology, so it's so easy to make it even probably even out. Anyway, it's just a question.
Final question maybe.
Okay.
You presented us the mental model with 2 with 8 elements, and then at the end you reflected this. I wondered if there are one or more elements which are crucial to the visual building, or is it just ticking them all?
I believe that the true hybrid must encompass, to truly be a hybrid, it must contain all of the qualities. But what really stood out to me among all of the qualities was not only the integration of public space, and so extending the public domain not only into the building, but also vertically, and then also I would say flexibility. And that's something that I believe the true hybrid building doesn't know what the future is, but it could adapt to it. And so to summarize, I would say the flexibility as well as the integration of the public space are the two, I believe, the points that stand above all others. And those were, although I think I believe my building fulfilled all of the points, I think those were the two that I really honed in on and kind of pushed further with.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.